Good evening, everyone. I wanted to do a short book review on a very interesting book that I read. The title of it is Dark Star Rising. The subtitle is Magick and Power in the Age of Trump. It was written by Gary Lachman. It is the first book I've ever read by this guy. A really good read. He's a very clear writer. And I'll just briefly describe why I'm interested in it at all. I want to know what people who believe in the occult actually believe, because, you know, I can dismiss people as being delusional very easily. If there's someone who's disconnected from reality and they just believe in fairy tales and magic and things that don't exist, then it's very easy to write them off. But if you have an intelligent person who interviews well, speaks well, writes well, and also studies a politics, which are sort of things of this world happening in real time, and you have someone who's looking through the lens of the occult, which is a quote-unquote real phenomenon insofar that it has a history. There are people that believe in, Hermetic traditions, and regardless if those things are valid or true, which I do not believe them to be true, it's interesting to think why people find value in them. There's something to be said about what is it that people find valuable about psychology. Psychology is a weird point of mysticism, religion, the science of thought, science itself, and kind of the emotions of people involved. So psychology is very interesting, and this book delves into psychology. So let's continue on with that thought, and then I'll introduce the book proper. If someone writes a book about magic, what are they referring to? That's kind of the question I came into this book with, because I like politics. I like reading about the moment that we're in. I like intelligent writers. I like people who sort of think through concepts, and I like crazy ideas, crazy thinkers. So I found this book by listening to him on a series of podcasts. There was a series on sense making from a channel called, Rebel Wisdom. And in this YouTube channel, they had a gentleman on named Daniel Schmachtenberger, who he is an excellent speaker, very, very just seems like a very nice guy, very smart guy, talks about all the existential risk, all the problems in the world right now, and how we can think about making sense of the world such that we can fix the world and the various problems that we have. And so I started listening because of him, got into, and I found this other video from this guy where he interviewed Gary Lachman. Gary Lachman talked about the occult and magic, and how it is his thesis, I'm paraphrasing, it is his thesis that there's something in the occult and magic thinking and chaos magic that brought about the 1 in a million chance for having Donald Trump getting elected in 2016. And so he goes over the history of that, and he actually does it very well. Now we're getting into the book itself, and so I'll just introduce it briefly. This book is grounded in reality, surprisingly. It does not require you to take leaps of faith that don't make sense out of sort of the grounded scientific realm that we sort of the things you can touch, taste, feel, sense, critically reason, things like that. And he makes it into a book about psychology. And then he sort of never gives a direct explanation of what magic is or what he believes magic to be, like which part is real and which part isn't real. He comes at it from this long tradition in the occult, because he's written lots of books on the occult, and the tradition goes something along the lines of, well, it's a weird combination of human psychology, charisma, the way thoughts and experiences enter into a person's mind, and then that person acts in the world And if it affects a large amount of people, and they can, if a really political, persuasive speaker can go out into a crowd and get a whole bunch of people on board, and they commit one single action, and that action has a meaningful effect on the reality around everybody else. And so that's what politics is, and that's what magic is in Gary Lachman's, in his writing throughout this. And that's a form of magic that I am interested in and can subscribe to, because he's not saying, you can generate fire out of nowhere, or some, something you would see on a TV show or like a movie or something. No one's saying that is what's happening here. What he's saying is there are influential people who have put together, they call them memes, like ideas, like from the Richard Dawkins idea of memes. These ideas that infect, the purpose of genes is to pass on their genetic code, and they do this through a series of evolution. So, you want to have kids and create society and a system around you that continues the human race for as long as possible, and that's how genes get passed around. Well, memes are a version of that's an idea, and how that gets propagated and spread around. So the general thesis of this book is, it's kind of just a look into history of how we got to the present moment. And Gary Lachman gives a lot of background information. I mean, he has a wealth of information that he can share in a very succinct manner. And the writing style I found very easy to digest. He goes through all the instances of magic that possibly could be associated with the title. He says about Trump, but really it's about all of the right side of the political spectrum, going back very far into history. He does talk about fascism, Nazism, the occult of thinking, the right-wing extremism in both those countries and their historical periods. Leads on to Russia, and how there's a man called Aleksandr Dugin, who is, a quote-unquote chaos magician who studied much of this, very right-leaning figure, a very traditionalist, so believes that there was a concept of synarchy. So the opposite of anarchy, we all know what anarchy is the lack of total government. Synarchy is the idea that the government controls all aspects of its citizens' lives. And so Aleksandr Dugin is involved with this line of thinking and traditionalism, which is the theory that the most, the best way to live life is, before all these religions, before everything, there was sort of the most traditional way possible, going back tens and thousands of years, whatever that was before religion, that is the way we should be, and you should do it through a synarchical means, through the means of the government. So he uses, this individual, Aleksandr Dugin, is a right-hand man for Putin, and it's kind of his magician in his court that gets Putin all this power. And so they accomplish this by inserting chaos into the system. And so that leads figures in America who lean on the right, such as Richard Spencer, to propagate literal memes on the internet and ideas and get people to their side and generate and conjure a figure that turns into Trump that represents their ideas in a form that's amenable to the U.S. population, such that they would vote for this man and he can become president. And literally he looks up to Putin as kind of a dictator, meaning Trump looks to Putin as a dictator, and Trump says, I want to be like that. And this is kind of all caused by a series of mystics working in the background that Gary Lachman, the author, calls chaos magicians. And so this is a very interesting, obviously, if you've been interested in anything I've just said, it's crazy to think about that there's someone documenting the history of all this. And who knows if it's true or not, but it's certainly interesting to think about. Let's just start systematically going through this, because I've given a lot of information. I just want it to be clear. The book starts out with an introduction, New World Disorder, where he talks about all the changes, many books nonfiction books that have come out in the last, it's 2021 when I'm recording this. So for the last 5 years, from 2016 to 2021, they talk about chaos and disorder and what is causing all this. And he takes a very mystical approach to all this, which is with the information, you can get information as quickly as possible now. There's lots of chaos happening in the system. We have this illusion that everything's ordered, but really underneath it, there's a lot of, conspiracy theories and distrust of institutions all across the board. There's, the dark powers of Eastern thinking versus Western thinking that have always been around, or left-leaning political ideology versus right-leaning political ideology. And these things are being manifested into, at protests in America, Antifa versus right-leaning groups. And so they kind of fight out on the streets. And with the internet, it's caused a lot of chaos to the system because now people are disconnected, yet more connected than they ever have been. And this book came out before coronavirus. This book was published in 2018, 2 years into the Trump presidency. But it talks a lot about how Trump got elected and what the means of magic utilized were. And so the first chapter is called I'm a Winner. And it outlines the pure power of belief. In America, apparently the history of magic in America is that there's lots of self-esteem, the power of positive thinking. So think of The Secret, think of all this new age, new thought, all these ideas of if you dream it, you can do it. And the explanation is that this is a form of magical thinking because to generate something in reality, it has to start as a thought in your head. And then from the thought, you communicate it out to the world, so you speak it and it becomes true. And then you have to tell it to a bunch of people and get them to agree with you. And then you gain power, and then you actually do those things. And so if one does this over a lifetime, at the end of their life, they can achieve lots of power, and that is a form of magic. So, I wouldn't call that magic. I would call that the science of influence, the science of psychology. But I would say these things fully admitting that even the best psychologists that study these things, science doesn't have an explanation for all of this. There is a form of charm and magic, and if you're sitting down with someone and having a conversation with them, looking at them in their eyes, they can convince you of things, or they can tell you their truth, and there's something there that's science clearly does not understand at this moment. Or, even if you go to a concert and listen to music, if you're, dancing to the music and you feel the energy in the room, other people around you are dancing, you feel like, emotions coming up, there's something there that, would you call that magic, or would you say science can take a brain scan of you and you're, they can certainly study that certain parts of the brain will light up, but to kind of the qualia aspect of that experience is incommunicatable. You can only feel it yourself. And, if you were a DJ or a musician, you can play it and at a venue, and if you play it good enough and people pay tickets and they drink or take drugs, and they get, everyone kind of collectively gets into this bubble of energy. Whatever that is, you've communicated as a musician on the stage the thought to generate a good feeling and transmitted it to everyone else. And if that's what magic is, and so far that's what I can see, that's what I'm deriving from this book, kind of the power of positive thinking is along the same lines of this. And so he goes into Trump grew up with the power of belief. It's, Colin Wright was a writer who talked about the concept of the right man, RIGHT man. So the right man, every time he's in a room, he believes he is the right person. And because a man creates that mindset, people will, bend to his will and do things on his behalf. And so Trump definitely has this within him. He was, Gary Lachman goes into Trump's background going to a certain type of preacher who wrote a lot of books on the power of positive thinking and belief. And so this preacher said all these things. If you think it'll happen. And so regardless of what you think about Trump, he, if you think he's smart or dumb or whatever, he certainly is persistent, and he believes himself, he's confident, and he believes himself to be correct. And clearly it has gotten him to a 1 in a million chance. Now, the alternative to this is, I believe Hillary Clinton in 2016 I think she had a lot of power of positive thinking. I think she wanted it as badly as anyone. So is it a sufficient explanation to say if you have the power of positive thinking that you can achieve anything? Well, clearly that wasn't the case for someone who spent her entire life getting to that point, and certainly seemed, I said the words in 2016, oh, for sure, she's going to become the next president. And I thought that, and a lot of people around me did too. I'm sure you listening to this thought that as well. So the first chapter goes into the science of that, or not the science of it, the mystery of that, the magic of that, and does delve into some science, and goes into kind of America in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and then it talks about how Trump wrote The Art of the Deal. And kind of have confidence, got to just follow your instinct, follow your gut, and keep on moving forward, and you'll achieve everything you want in this world. Going on to the next chapter, it's going to be positive chaos. In this chapter, Lachman writes about what chaos magic actually is, and in his definition of this, he speaks about how chaos is saying something or doing something that puts chaos into the system, puts everyone on edge a little bit. And Trump and his team certainly did this. He disrupted the system, and when you disrupt the system, people don't know what to do, and then they end up following the person who speaks the loudest and insists that they're right. I think this is a very good explanation of exactly what happened during the 2016 election. I think Trump got a lot of mileage out of just being interesting to listen to hear about. And he got a lot more done just because he said something crazy and people kind of just thought, is that true or not? And that pause is outside the status quo, which means it's effective in some capacity. Lachman states that Trump is the first postmodern president we've had ever. And this was a really interesting point, because if you think about it, I think he's onto something. In terms of postmodernism, it's kind of been a thing for 50 or 60 years or so. We had an era of modernism since the Enlightenment, where we're scientists recording things, writing stuff down, making sense of the world, the architecture. Think of modern architecture. Think of biological classes. We classify everything. We put everything into nice, neat boxes. Well, postmodernism is sort of like this. The world is an illusion. There's, nothing's real. Truth doesn't matter. Everything is, a construct of people's minds. And Lachman says that Trump is the first president that realized that the world is an illusion. He can kind of insert chaos into the system, and then from there put the pieces back together in the way he sees fit, that ends up with Trump being the one in power. And that's why people listen to what he has to say, and that's how he got elected. He dismantled the status quo of the other, especially the other Republican candidates at the time. I just remember in particular, like Jeb Bush, they making fun of the way he is, when I thought Jeb Bush would, because he was the governor of Florida. Jeb Bush is like he has political experience. I didn't necessarily like him or agree with him, but he's politically connected. He's got everybody that would have worked for Bush would go over and work for Jeb Bush. I'm referring to George W. Bush, and then of course just the Bush dynasty that would have helped Jeb. So yeah, Trump just completely derailed all of that and started chaos to that system. So Trump is the first postmodern president because he realizes that the use of lies and making the media and the people watching the TV spectacle, they want to be entertained. They don't want to be kind of the defeat of nihilism. Nothing matters. Well, at least you can be entertained on the way out. And I think there's some truth to this statement. I'm not sure if this is Lachman's original idea or if he credits this to someone else. I don't know, but it got me thinking along this line of trail that, man, since Trump got elected in 2016, we're in a new dawn, a new era. People are going to be talking about this for many years to come. And it's not because of the president himself. It's about the factors that got him elected. And so I'm just tired as anyone talking about him here 5 years later after the election. But I'm just, I think collectively we as a group, and especially me at this moment in time, is just trying to process how is American history changed and what's it going to look like in the future, and how do we get out of the problems that we have. And it's not based on one person in particular. It's based on a lot of different people, but it kind of just manifests in talking about, and that's the whole reason I'm interested in this book, that this guy is connecting occult ideas and the history of magic with politics, a very current, a very sanitized view of the world. Everyone kind of wears suits and speaks clearly, and yet there's this underlying psychological, I don't want to say war, but battles going on between people, and deals are trying to be made. Power is trying to be, it changes hands very quickly. And I like that undercurrent. There, it's very, like, if you like House of Cards, that's a prominent theme throughout the entire series, is what is said on the surface is very different than what's being done below the surface. But anyway, okay, moving on to chapter 2. Chapter 2 talks about the history of chaos magic, chaos magicians. One section of the book says that the first thing to understand about chaos magic is that it's in tune with the times, not with the infinite. So those people that mess with things in the current moment are messing with, they're inserting chaos into the system. They're not speaking to long-held values and beliefs, like, the notion of truth. What is true will win out in the end. Chaos person will take a short version of the truth and insert it into a system and cause as much chaos as possible. Chaos magic accepts the modern and postmodern world. Chaos magic wants to sink a desire deep down into the deep unconscious, into the nether region, or the unconditioned awareness of being. It kind of goes towards inner primal chaos. And I am reading some things from the book. I'm just trying to gather ideas to communicate them. One quote that I highlighted was that we can say that chaos magic works by inducing synchronicities, by somehow purposefully creating meaningful chance events. And this is very interesting. I went out and bought a book on Jung so I could try to understand this concept. Apparently it was, the concept of synchronicity. That is, random events happen at all points in time, and it's just the nature of reality, nature of life. But if there's a random chance event and it has a lot of meaning to you as an individual, and you convert that into meaning for other people, and it starts a series of events that makes a chain reaction that grows much larger than it wouldn't have otherwise, one chance encounter that turns into a butterfly effect that creates the hurricane later on, that would be referred to as a synchronicity. And we clearly do not understand that concept now. Yet people can weaponize that phenomenon and use it to their will and bend a lot of people. And that's an element of, on the face of it, what democracy is trying to achieve. It's, can you be an influential enough person such that people like what you're saying, they elect you to represent them, and then you act upon their will and get as much done for the country as you can, for your constituents, and progress the country in a positive direction. When Lachman describes chaos magicians, I mean, this is anybody this could describe me when I'm trying to get some stuff done and I have to gather a bunch of people to get together and accomplish a task. I've been recruited by other people. whatever it is in life. It's trying to accomplish, playing a team sport, playing a single person sport. Like I'm trying to playing tennis or golf. I have to go get lessons from someone who knows better, and I have to convince them to help me so I can go on and become better at the sport. So that's sort of what all these concepts together is what is talked about in chapter 2. And then chapter 3 talks about gurus and demagogues. In this chapter, it does go into various gurus in the past. He does talk about the mysticism of Nazi Germany and how the people that are historically evil figures now, kind of that's the narrative, at the time were very good at convincing people, and especially large groups of people, because Hitler was democratically elected, and he kind of ran on the platform of, we're going to, Germany's going through a hard time. There needs to be strict enforcements. The government needs to have a strong leader. We need to have a 1,000-year plan. Everyone become ordered. We're going to build the trains. They're going to come on time. We're going to make an army. All these things sound sort of good until they go to the very extreme. The man Hitler, gets into power using this type of rhetoric, and wars are fought and atrocities are committed. And so at what point did it go wrong? At what point was there mysticism? At what point was there chaos? And this is all discussed in the lens of Magick and the Occult. Okay, chapter 4 is called Alt-Right Now. And he talks about how the alt-right, with various members and groups. One of them was Richard Spencer, who is a figure I've heard about for the past couple of years. He's kind of an open racist, white nationalist. The basis for his beliefs are, he thinks that races should be separate and that America is becoming a worse country because too much immigration and too many non-white people are, all that kind of nonsense. And I think the interesting part about this is the how the ideas have propagated. He does talk about right-wing, meaning Gary Lachman talks about how Richard Spencer has led his ideas, and a lot of it is through the internet, under the platform, under the guise of sort of free speech. And I guess it is covered by free speech. Talks about all these memes, like literal internet memes at this point, and how these memes spread on like boards like 4chan and 8chan, where it's kind of seen as okay to be racist and to make racist claims, and just there's always the trickery of, oh, we're just anonymous, oh, it's free speech, none of this matters. They don't even know if they're right. And as I've come to learn in 2021 through an excellent documentary on the origins of the QAnon conspiracy, there's a 6-part documentary series that's just excellent. I highly recommend it if you're interested at all in these topics. QAnon Into the Storm. And a documentary filmmaker just kind of goes off on his own and tracks down the origins of the QAnon phenomenon, which eventually culminated in January 6th of 2021 with storming the Capitol. And so it's a fascinating, wild journey, and essentially QAnon was started by it's unclear in the documentary at the very end, but it's highly, highly, highly suggested that it started on by the creators of the 8chan board. And so in an element here, they would be chaos magicians for the right. And they did this through memes. And one of the memes propagated was Pepe the Frog. So Pepe the Frog, I think we've all seen, is like the green guy, the little green thing, and kind of lots of anti-Semitism, a lot of ugly things, but it's kind of funny too. And so I've only ever interacted with I've only ever seen this meme be kind of funny, but apparently there's a lot of racist connotations to that, and they jump around the more horrible aspects of their racial ideas through jokes. So it's sort of funny. I mean, in that way, it is chaotic, and it's crazy and it's wild, and it's using the internet to communicate these ideas on a scale we've never seen before. But I mean, it's wild. This chapter in 2018 is a very good overview of what they understood at the time. And with all this Russiagate scandal that was largely debunked, most of that were Russian, like, bot farmers sending memes across the internet, and there was an element of that got into people's Facebook feeds, which caused them to become more radicalized. So Russia is, arguably in this book, under the guise of the Aleksandr Dugin, who works, he's like a right-hand man for for Putin, has started this war of propaganda, and this is going on and sowing dissent and chaos into America, and Russia's going to come from the ashes and take over from there. So that's kind of the interesting understory of all this happening under the surface of politics. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap up this review. I want to appreciate you for listening this far in. If just you're interested by any of the topics that I've covered through this review, I do recommend you read it. It's a short book. It's an easy read. It's very legible, very understandable. You can go in not knowing about anything I've talked about, not knowing anything about the occult, anything about magic. Just kind of go in with an open mind. If you can kind of trust the author here. Gary Lachman is, from my impression of reading his one book here, a good, solid thinker. All right, well, I think I'm going to end the review there. Overall, very good book, like I mentioned. A lot of interesting topics, and I can always appreciate both a solid thinker, but also just a good writer, a very clear writer. And that's pretty much the best compliment I can give for not knowing about the work and just going in kind of blind and reading a first book by someone. So anyway, thank you for watching. Have a good rest of your day, and especially if you stuck around this far. And keep on watching. Leave me a comment below. Thank you.